In at number 10, we have the Crystal Wyvern. And why would you say that this is such a strong creature? Well, I wouldn't say this is going to be the creature which is going to be like the most buff creature out there, but considering how easy this thing is to get, its strength is absolutely insane. So in terms of taming method to strength ratio, it has to be on this list. And yes, it is still a wyvern, so it is still going to pack a huge punch, and considering its tame method being one of the easiest in the game, it really does have to be put on this list, and no other creature can really fit the number 10 spot in my opinion. This just has everything which you could really need out of a wyvern, and especially with the blood crystal wyvern, you have yourself an even better version of the original creature which we all know and love. And this really is a creature which should be hugely celebrated across every Ark player's journey. And I really do think that everyone should tame one of these things at some point, as long as you do have Crystal Isles. And that shouldn't be too much of a stretch considering it is a free DLC map. And these things are just so good and so easy to tame with that passive taming method that they really cannot be discounted on this list. Again, because of their taming method being so easy. Even like a raptor tame is harder than this, and look at how much stronger this thing is than the raptor. Next up, we have the rock drake, and this creature really does pack a punch when it comes to all of that damage. This is an insane creature when it comes to any kind of damage. It really does pack a punch in the mobility department, of course, but also in the damage department as well. And considering its mobility, it really is something special which you can't celebrate with every Ark creature out there, as there are loads of really great strong tames that don't have great mobility, and that really should be counted. Obviously, in this list, they aren't going to be fully counted, as some of the creatures further along do not have great mobility, but they are definitely a lot stronger than that creature in terms of damage, apart from the creature in the number 1 slot, which you may think is a bit of a surprise, but I really think, considering all of its abilities, it is 100% worthy of that spot, and no other creature is as strong in it in those scenarios, those certain scenarios, of course, which are actually a very fundamental part of the Ark game. But back to the rock drake, this thing also has a very nice and interesting taming method, albeit not the easiest, but I do like a good challenge when it comes to taming any kind of creature, as I feel a huge sense of achievement once I've tamed it. I don't just want the easiest tames. The Crystal Wyvern is obviously an exception. That thing is just absolute gold, and it really does seem like an absolute cheat to have one of those things, considering how easy they are to tame, and you know how powerful they actually are. But yes, the rock drake is a bit of a difficult tame, but once you've got one of these things, especially on Arboration, you're really not going to regret taming one. Next up, we have the Basilisk, and this really does have to be included on the list, and although its taming method is rubbish, and I really don't like this thing as a creature, and especially its taming method, that is the main rationale behind it, it is definitely still a very strong creature which is capable of huge amounts of damage. And if you do have the patience to tame one and the resources to gather it, which is rock drake eggs, wyvern eggs work as well, and you can use magmasaur eggs too. You'll probably be using rock drake eggs, considering most people tame this thing on Arboration. Then you're definitely going to enjoy this creature, as it has a wealth of abilities, like going into the ground, dealing torpor with its second ability, but also just dealing loads and loads of damage with its bite. And this creature really is built to pack a punch when it comes to the damage department, so it obviously very much makes sense why this creature is on the list. In at number 7, we have the Thler, and this creature is one of those creatures which you have to put on any Strongest Tames list. It really can't be discounted from this role. It has such a wealth of abilities, it is absolutely insane. Namely that this thing can climb trees, walls and vertical surfaces, all of that kind of jazz, you know. And also on top of that, which is a little bit sad in terms of ASA, it is actually really rubbish at traversing terrain now, because the terrain is so buggy in its form that this thing just glitches everywhere. So maybe don't use this thing as much for all of that transport on ASA, as it really isn't doing too great at the moment, like some other creatures as well with that similar department. And we'll probably see that continuing on as other maps release and more creatures are added to the game, and then we'll see the true horror that is the ASA terrain system. But also, unlike many carnivores, this creature actually does have really great mobility and the bleed ability, which doesn't really make sense when you think about it, considering like it's literally ripping creatures apart with its teeth. But you know, this creature does deal the bleed ability, which is an insanely useful ability, which I personally think every carnivore should really have. But considering its use in Ark, it makes sense why everyone doesn't have it, because it is a very useful ability which only the most powerful of carnivores can really wield. And the creature in the number 1 spot has the bleed ability, of course, and you can't really put a creature which doesn't have the bleed ability in at the number 1 spot. But the Thler is still definitely very deserving of the number 7 spot, because there are definitely some creatures out there, like the next one on the list, which are more powerful than it and do a better job than it. But it is still a really great tame of its day, considering how early this thing came out, and it still is a really great strong tame to this day, and again, very deserving of this spot. Next up, we have the Shadowman, and this creature is one of those tames which I have to put on the list for strongest tames. Its amount of abilities is absolutely insane, and it is tremendous how many great abilities this creature has, and it really can't be discounted. Namely, it has really great mobility, although I shouldn't really talk about that considering it is a strongest tames list. But in terms of its damage, it does have that pack buff. I'm not sure if it has the bleed ability, but it can charge up its damage over time, which isn't actually a very long period. After it deals enough damage, it can charge up its attack and deal insane amounts of damage, and these are really great creatures to use for bosses. And if you wanted to, you could use them for the Moda. I've tried it once. It actually didn't go as bad as you may think, especially considering that hydration buff which they have. And they're really great swimmers as well, which definitely does play to their advantage in mobility. But in terms of damage, these things really do pack a punch and are great creatures for bosses if you just want to give them a shot. In at the number 5 spot, we have the Giga, and it really wouldn't be a strongest Ark Tames list without this creature being here. It is just one of those tames which has to be put on this list for obvious reasons. It is a big, hunking carnivore capable of so much stuff, and especially in the damage department. This is one of the highest damage dealing dinos in the game. Its base damage once tamed is absolutely insane, and when wild is even more insane, because these things do significantly debuff when tamed, which doesn't really make sense, but considering the time when it came out, it kind of had to be done, as then it would have been way too OP for this job. And now there are some other creatures which are definitely more powerful than it. That's why it's only in at the number 5 spot. But still, considering when it came out in its day, it is still really held up to the test of time. And it is a great creature for dealing insane amounts of damage. And it really does pack a punch. Its only real downsides being its rubbish stamina, and also its, not bleed ability, rage meter, which means it only really has a set amount of health, and leveling up its health isn't really going to do much, apart from obviously the percentage difference will change. Either way, its health is quite limited, as after a certain amount of health is gone, it will simply lose control. Next up, we have the Kronosaurus, and this creature is pretty much the same thing as the Giga, although just with a few upgrades, and it is a newer creature. So what really do you expect from this thing? And it is definitely one of those creatures which I say has to be on the list of strongest Ark Tames, no matter who it's coming from, what type of player, or what creatures they use. Because I don't really use this creature that much, it is still a very strong Ark Tame, and obviously has to be on this list. Its main advantages over the Giga, and why it is higher than the Giga, is the fact that it doesn't have a rage meter, and its rage meter, not rage meter, I'm getting caught up on everything. It's like, oh, I can't remember what it's called. It's Blood Rage. Sorry, I'm getting caught up on all kinds of Ark abilities. Once that is full, it deals more damage than the Giga, and considering it's in combat for a lot of the time, that meter, I don't know why I was going to say beta there, is going to be really, really full most of the time when you're in heated combat. So you're going to be dealing insane amounts of damage, and with no rage meter, you have the whole spectrum of health the Kronosaurus has. It's a really tough dinosaur name to say. And also, on top of that as well, it does have great mobility, which I haven't really talked about. And I'm pretty sure it does attack a little bit faster than the Giga as well, allowing a little bit more DPS, as we could all do with just a little bit more of that. In at number 3, we have the Rhoa. And this creature really is one to be highly respected by any Ark player, with no exceptions. And yes, this is one of the newer tames that has been added to Ark. The fact that it can pick up a Rex, which no other Ark creature can do, is an insane thing to have. And yes, cryopods exist, so you can quite easily transport creatures larger than a Rex. It still does really stand a point. And in terms of PvP at the moment, these things are being heavily used. And it was actually a very controversial position for Wildcard to put these things into ASA from day one, especially considering they increased the spawn rate by a lot. And the reason for that is these creatures are so strong, and people just wanted a more kind of primitive version of Ark, which we kind of all do want to go back to someday, and we hope Ark 2 is that, but I'm not actually sure it will be, because it may just end up like the first one. And I know Wildcard says no, that is not going to happen, but we don't actually really know, and Wildcard is in a little bit of a weird state at the moment, considering snail game stuff. It's not in a great position. But if you did want to know to tame one of these things, get a pheromone gland from the male, tame yourself a Bronto. Bronto is definitely preferred. Get those resources, which were on screen. Then find yourself a female Rhoa, trap it in some way. The net gun is preferred. Get out your spyglass, or you can obviously use a magnifying glass. Damage this creature as much as you can, and you may think you're taking it too far. Just do it as much as you can. Obviously, don't kill it. That would be a huge waste, but still, really get its health down while it's in that trap. And if you're a net gun, obviously you're time limited, but you still got a whole minute to do it, so it really isn't that bad. And after that, you want to feed your pheromone gland to your creature, obviously before you've let the creature out of the trap, otherwise this stage may not work. Actually, it just won't really. It won't do the thing it's supposed to. Then after that, this thing will come out of its trap and then impregnate your dino, where all of the hunger timers or craving timers, that's I think what they're called, will happen, where you'll need all those resources, only necessary to get 100% effectiveness. Then your dino will roll over, die, and you have yourself a baby Rhoa. In at number 2 is the Reaper, and the Reaper really did. I don't know what I'm turning into. Do you know what milk duds are? Maybe I'm turning into one of those things. Either way, if you didn't know already, the Reaper is one of the most powerful and strong tames which you'll find in any Ark playthrough, and the tame method is pretty similar to the Rhoa, so I won't go through it. But instead of your dino being impregnated and hunger time is not existing on this thing, you'll need XP to get 100% effectiveness. Yeah, there's no difference in the taming method at all, really. There just isn't one. They're pretty much just a rehashing, although obviously this creature did come first all the way back in 2017, so I guess it is 6 years older than the Rhoa, and I do realise it's been absolutely ages since Operation came out. I remember when that map was new. Either way, in terms of this thing's abilities, it doesn't really have an ability apart from its insane damage, and I think its second attack deals torpor. It's also really great mobility and just overall great ergonomics as a creature, and Wildcard really couldn't have designed this creature any better. It is just so good at its job in every way. If it was allowed into boss arenas, then bosses would be some of the easiest creatures in the game, so it really does deserve to be in this spot. And in at number 1 is the Deinonychus. And what really did you expect? Actually, you may have expected a very different creature to be in this list, but I think I have a very valid reason to put this thing in. Firstly, its taming method being one of the easiest in the game makes this one of the best creatures, if not the best creature, for strength to taming method difficulty ratio, whereas the Reaper is a very, very long and somewhat annoying process. Unless you're on Gen 2, then it is dead easy. And also the fact that this thing has a wealth of great abilities, namely its bleed ability, and the fact that it can inflict that on bosses as it is allowed into boss arenas, and it can inflict that bleed damage is insane, especially paired with its pack buff as well. You can have a group of these things going ham on any boss, and no creature will do better at that job. These are the best for it, unless you're on Extinction, obviously. Then some other creatures are going to be in order. The Kronosaurus and the Giga are definitely going to be needed for that, as albeit they are really, really powerful tames. The health can't quite rack up to some of the Titans, but there isn't going to be the bosses which you're facing in most cases. And for everything else, these things are going to do splendidly for everything, and the mobility is really great as well. So if you do get into any trouble in a fight, you can quickly dash away with nice parkour skills, which, you know, isn't quite as elegant as some other Ark creatures, but still extremely useful. So I do urge you, if you get the chance, really, really do tame one of these things. And in my opinion, they're the strongest Ark creatures. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you enjoyed this one, as I did really enjoy making it for you. And as always, comment down below the top 10 strongest Ark Tames in the comments below, and I'll see you all later.